Hi. Greetings from the Great Sage. Before we start, please subscribe and hit the notification bell icon and don't miss any contents. This is the light novel of that time I got reincarnated as a slime. If you haven't watched previous video, I will leave the link on the description box or you can click here. Let's start. This is Tensura Light Novel Volume 16. Tensura Light Novel. Volume 16. The End of the Game. Chapter 1. The Betrayal. New enemies and arrival of allies. The control room was in chaos. The enemy that had suddenly appeared was far more troublesome than they had expected. Hey, have you been able to measure the existence value of the guy who is aiming for Masayuki? Got it. It was roughly 1.8 million, but that ballooned up to 2.8 million after being equipped with mythical grade equipment. What, that's foul. Alpha's report made Ramrus very upset, but complaining alone would not help, so all she could do now was think desperately about countermeasures. It is said that mythical grade equipment lends its power to those it recognizes as its master. In Albert Dono's case, his existence value was more than doubled, but even with that, it seems that he still hasn't fully brought out its true potential. Ramrus agreed with Beretta's analysis. After equipping the mythical grade equipment, Albert had become the equivalent of an incarnated spiritual lifeform, and according to the data measured at that time, his existence value had increased from 180,000 to over 400,000. This alone was already quite powerful, but it seemed that the mythical grade equipment still had a considerable amount of potential left in them. Albert had since gone into an evolutionary sleep, and there was very much to be expected for when he woke up. Once that happened, it would make one wonder just dangerous Kurobi was now that he would have grown enough to create mythical grade equipment, but now was not the time to consider that. Mythical grade equipment, while rare and wonderful, was only a threat in the hands of the enemy. What are we going to do? Even with Trainee-chan and Cherries, we're being pushed back by that Celerio guy. And besides, Venom and the others are no match for that Cornu guy. Ramrus's concern was understandable. Venom had evolved into a demon peer, and his existence value had risen to 400,000. But unfortunately, now was not the time to pursue these matters. Swallowing her frustration at having so many things on her mind, Ramrus forcefully pressed back the unanalyzable displeasure and gave the orders. Even if you guys die, I'll bring you back to life with my power. So feel free to use everything available. The main problem is Masayuki. What do you mean? Even if he dies, he'll just be sent here, but if he's taken away, then that's it, right? So I think it's safer to evacuate him. I see. About that, Bernie and the others are trying to get him out. Ramrus let out a new an exclamation. She was impressed by the fact that Bernie and the others had come to the same conclusion as herself and that they had started to act before they had even received instructions to do so. In the first place, Masayuki was a chicken-hearted person who would never be able to commit suicide. Even in the event of an emergency, it was unlikely that he would be able to escape by killing himself. On the other hand, if Bernie was going to accompany him, she could rest assured. Contact Bernie. Tell him to set their escape destination to here. And, as I'm sure you're aware, if something goes wrong, just do what you must do. Understood. Following Ramrus's instructions, Alpha immediately sent out the telepathy net. The encryption process was flawless, and the command was sent to Bernie without any time lag. After confirming that, Ramrus finally breathed a sigh of relief. Well, I think that's about all we can do, she said. The large monitoring screen was divided into sections, showing the battle statuses of each location. No matter the location, their companions were struggling, and the situation was not good. We're really useless without Rimuru. The timing was terrible. If the Guardians had been awake, we wouldn't have been at such a disadvantage. That's true, but… Indeed, Beretta was correct. If only they had had their usual strength, then they would not have been so far behind. But even so, Ramrus felt responsible. For Ramrus, life in the Jura Tempest Federation was irreplaceable. At that moment, Beta, who was monitoring the Magicule's remaining power, shouted out in an urgent voice. There's an emergency. What the hell is it this time? Although it was expected, the Magicule supply from Voldora-sama has been cut off. At this rate, the city will be returned to the ground in less than 10 minutes. What the? Does that mean that Master has been defeated? That was a difficult reality for Ramrus to swallow. But with Velgrind as his opponent, she had to admit that it was a possibility. It was the anticipation of this situation that had led to the evacuation. Ramrus decided to believe that Rimuru would find a way to take care of Voldora. Things were not going to get any better if she just stayed depressed, so she had to think positively and do whatever she could. So, what's the status of the evacuation? No problems there. It is fortunate that Masayuki Dono succeeded in persuading those who were opposing the evacuation before he left. No matter where, there were always those who complained too much, and the capital city Rimuru was no exception. Gamma, who had been checking the situation over there, assured that there was no one left in the city. No problem then, was what Rambers thought as she decided to separate the metropolitan area. The defense function cannot be activated without anyone there. It's a shame, then, that massive damage in the city will be inevitable. Hold on, Beretta-chan. If you say that, it's only going to shake my resolve. However, the situation really was unavoidable. Rambers herself didn't have much mana left, and now that she had expanded the labyrinth to its maximum, she had no room for extra structures. That was the downside to relying on Veldora for energy, but Rambers could not think of any other solution to this problem. Of course, I understand that very well. Well, I'm sure if it were Rimuru-sama, he would say that we could just rebuild everything again. That's right, so I guess we'll just have to be decisive and live with it. Gritting her teeth at her own helplessness, Rambers continued carrying out the city evacuation. All that remained was to pray that the city would not be destroyed by stray bullets once it returned to the ground. But then. Emergency report. New enemies have appeared on the surface. 2 of them. We cannot measure their existence values accurately because they are outside of the labyrinth, but we estimate their numbers to be over 1 million at the very least. This time the report came from Delta, who was monitoring the surface. The size of the small monitor was switched and enlarged so that everyone could see it. What appeared on the screen were 2 angels, no, 2 fallen angels with black wings. They were a duo of a large muscular female warrior and a small beautiful girl. They also had 3 pairs of wings. Are you kidding me? They have the same number of wings, which means these guys are also seraphim. Panicking, Rambers flew around, feeling completely helpless at this point. But then she remembered something and asked Delta with a glimmer of hope. Delta-chan. How can you be so sure that they're the enemy? Maybe they. Though unlikely, the other side might actually be friendly, and to Rambers, who had generated such naive thoughts, Delta could only tell her the cruel answer. It's because those 2 are preventing us from recovering the hole that Velgrin-sama made. As soon as the maze is closed, our victory is confirmed, so it's unlikely. Her answer was unquestionable and very clear. Oh, that's right. Thank you. Rambers stopped flying around and sat powerlessly on Beretta's shoulder. At this point, Rambers felt overwhelmed with disgust by the enemy's strategy of bringing in 4 million class enemies, to the point that she felt like cursing all night long. But just then, a reliable ally awoke. Leave the surface grounds to me. The city that bears the name of Rimuru-sama will not easily be destroyed. The newly evolved barrier Lord Geld had returned. Geld? Rambers cried. Cried with joy. Geld-sama's existence value is over 2.37 million. I've added up all of his equipment and I'm sure he'll be a match for any intruder. Geld's own legendary grade equipment had reached the mythical grade at the same time Geld was evolving. It was also because of Geld surrounding Yauki that it had evolved so well. In fact, Rimuru never expected this either, but all those present mistakenly believed that everything was a part of Rimuru's plans. That's Rimuru for you. Even with my eyes, I couldn't have foreseen this kind of development. Rambers, whose eyes were quite piercing, said this confidently. But Beretta brushed it off as if nothing had happened. That's right. What a terrifying deliberate plan. Moreover, another awakening had been completed. I am here, too. The other enemy will be my prey. It was Kumara, the Chimera Lord. Kumara-sama's existence value is measured to be around 1.9 million. Without any special equipment to have such a value, the enemy is no longer a threat. At Alpha's report, the control room erupted in cheers. And as if to prove Alpha's words, a fierce battle began on the surface as well. What was even more surprising was that Guild's men were also scattered at various locations, setting up a powerful barrier to protect the city from the aftermath of the battle. Now we can win this. It looks like we're going to be okay for the time being. Rambers made a declaration of victory, and Beretta was relieved. However, it was too early to relax. Phantom King Feldway's plan was not yet finished. Rather, everything up until now had merely been a diversion, and his true goal was something else entirely. The tension that had been building in the control room relaxed slightly. After making a declaration of victory over Beretta's shoulder, Rambers fell silent, as if she had no strength left. But Beretta was familiar with such scenes, and from the very beginning, he had maintained a calm demeanor while continuing to take care of the restless lord. Shinji, who had been observing the situation from a distance, was silently taking in the current commotion, as if it were someone else's problem. The battle was unfolding in a way that was beyond his understanding, to the point that he could no longer believe that it was real. That is why Shinji remained calm. He could understand why Rambers was upset, but couldn't she have been calmer? He thought that to himself. If only she could learn from Beretta-san a little. Those were Shinji's true feeling, but he would never say it out loud. If he were to say such a thing, he would not only incur unnecessary wrath, but would also risk having his salary cut. Besides, Shinji remembered the victory party that had been held the other day. The power of those Magians was unimaginable. And it was Demon Lord Rimuru, to whom all these powerful people swore their allegiance. Shinji was an otherworlder, and by Freedom Association standards, he was a special A rank. He had also measured his existence value, and it was now over 120,000. On top of that, he possessed a unique skill healer, which had once him an ace commander in the Imperial Army. He had once conceitedly believed that his strength belonged to the upper class, yet here, he was nowhere near outstanding compared to the others. To be honest, Shinji's understanding could not keep up with the status quo anymore. As was the case with Geld earlier, the evolution of monsters was truly inexplicable. I'm so glad that I defected from the Empire to Tempest. Shinji thanked Master Gadra from the bottom of his heart. He looked on the monitor again and saw that Minutes, one of his former superiors, was struggling against Cornu, one of the 3 Phantom Commanders. The scene looked like something out of a movie. In short, it was extremely unrealistic. Could it be that they think of themselves as the main characters? It even made Shinji generate such doubts. Perhaps that was why. Perhaps that was why Shinji did not feel a sense of crisis and switched his thoughts to something more interesting. To put it simply, it was an escape from reality. He was thinking about Shuna, who had just brought snacks from everyone. Yeah, Shuna-san is still so cute and pretty. It didn't matter what he thought about his employer, or rather, he didn't care. What currently occupied Shinji's mind was not the tactless fighting, but the very cute Shuna. The memory of her bowing and leaving the room was enough to make Shinji feel happy. She was dignified and had no flaws. And although Shuna looked like a fragile and beautiful girl, it was well known that she became very scary when she was angry. Shinji was not the only one who admired Shuna. Mark, Sheen, and the new apprentice assistants, Lucius and Raymond, were also members of the Shuna fan club. In comparison, his employer, Ramrus, was. He couldn't help but sigh. Hey, Shinji-chan. Is there something you have to say to me? It was only at times like these that Ramrus's instincts were keen. No, it's nothing. Shinji hurriedly scrambled to deny anything. In the first place, it was a mistake to compare Shuna and Ramrus. That was like comparing an adult to a child. Or rather, there were actually more fundamental reasons for the difference. Shuna still had the air of a young girl, but her manner was that of a sophisticated adult. Ramrus has been alive for thousands of years, but her mental age was still low, perhaps because her body was still growing. Ramrus, who was a child in both appearance and mind, could not compete with Shuna at all. But Ramrus always seems cute, so it's better to treat her more gently, that's what Shinji thought. And so, with that, Shinji's thoughts were currently focused on unnecessary things. It was because of this that he took notice. It was because of this that he realized that the man who was always so lazy had stood up at some point. And for some reason, Vesta, his always serious boss, was lying asleep on his desk. Huh? Dino-san, what are you doing? It was really just a coincidence that Shinji had asked that question. However, that one action was the most crucial play of the day. Shinji, who had been the least conscientious of the group, took the greatest credit for the day. That's all for today. Hope you guys enjoy this video. Please check my other YouTube videos. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe and hit the notification icon, and don't miss any updates.